tonight we're going to be talking about savings. And I know that for a lot of people, this is a topic that is very familiar to you. And when it comes to saving, a lot of us hear lots of different things, right? So we have our own opinion. We've heard things growing up so much about like savings piece. So our objectives for tonight, like what are some of the things that we're going to be covering? We're going to be exploring some of the motivations and influences on our spending behaviors. So if you know anything about us or you've attended any of our sessions before, you know that we focus a lot on kind of like the behavioral economics piece. And Sasha just did a wonderful job last week covering that. Just we focus a lot on why people make some of the decisions they do, what motivates us, what influences us. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that tonight. I'm also going to be providing you with some tools that help support like your overall savings goals, and then look at some strategies that can help to increase your savings, right? So for a lot of us, we love the idea of saving, we believe in it, but sometimes it's hard to stay motivated and that's hard to grow that. I have another poll for you. So we like to collect information on just understanding a little bit about you. So tell us, so we have a question for you. So before like this webinar series, or before this webinar tonight, how likely were you to save money? So how likely are you to save money now? And again, like these polls are anonymous. All right, I'll give it a few more minutes. So you have a few options on here. And we look like we're at 91%. All right, so I'm going to end the poll and have like my colleagues take a snap of this. So for what we show, to just kind of share the results here. Most of you says that you are extremely likely to save now. This is good for us to know. We get like different results whenever we ask this question. So we definitely like to know what the responses are from like our attendees. So thank you for sharing that. All right, and from on to poll into some definitions now. So when we think about saving, kind of like a textbook definition that I have up here, like the accumulation of excess funds, and of course, like the excess and like those quotes. But when we think about saving money, we think about money that we're setting aside for future use. So it's an intentional process. So we take action to save and make saving possible, because we have different goals, we have different dreams that we're working towards. And so we try to do that through savings. So when we think about savings, just think of it as, of course, money set aside for future use, not something that you're going to set aside to try to use right now, but for the future. I also want to clarify a couple things as I kind of deep dive a little bit into this topic of savings, because when we teach about savings, our goal is to help participants build like good and healthy saving habits. It doesn't matter how much that is. And a lot of times you will hear people put numbers on different things, and those of course are estimate, but everybody is at such different places in their lives. So we try to focus on just helping to build those habits, not telling you exactly what you need to do, because you know what your future goals are, you know what your retirement plan looks like, or ideas for what your retirement is going to look like. So you might be able to make those individualized goals for yourself. So part of this is to just for us to help with building those habits. So in a time like this, we are aware that a lot of families, individuals have lost jobs or seen reduced hours due to the pandemic. But and we also know that folks are worried about money, and saving might not be a top priority for some. It could be a hard place to be right now with thinking about savings, but throughout this webinar, we've covered several topics, and we would be remiss if we didn't cover something on savings. So we definitely want to cover this topic and hear from you tonight as well. So in the chat, as I'm going through, please feel free to share comments or questions. My colleagues are here to answer your questions. And please go ahead and do that as I go through. So just wanted to share that with you. Our focus is on building like healthy saving habits. Now, when we think about like what drives people to save, what are our motives? Why do we do this? Why do you hear people say it all the time? So some of our motives for savings, of course, some of them are kind of precautionary. You know, we want to take some steps to make sure that if something happens, we have a little bit of money put away. So we want to build up those reserves and have some money put away for the unforeseen. We also want to focus on like future well-being, right? We love the future. We think about, just the different things we want to accomplish for ourselves and for our loved ones. And so when we think of savings, we're thinking about like these habits that when we practice them now, how are they going to benefit us in the future? So those are some of the different pieces when it comes to like, what are some of our motives? The others, of course, as focus on like building like interest on the money that you're already saving. So kind of, for a lot of people, it makes sense for them to think of it as like, free money. You're earning money on the money that you are already saving. So in whatever savings category you have it, you are earning money that way. So for some people, when they think about like savings and what drives them, like what pushes them to save, of course, is that sense of independence. So I hear people talk a lot about like financial freedom, financial independence, and how whether it's investing, saving, how these behaviors can help them get to that place that they want to get to. It also helps with, do I have any entrepreneurs in the audience? For a lot of people who want to pursue like their own businesses or, just have like different future things that they want to work towards, how securing money and building up like their savings, how that can help them move towards like those goals. So for a lot of people, it's not saying that they'll have the entirety of what they need for starting like their new business, they're starting their small business, but at least they will have something put away to help them, to help drive them and move them in the right direction as to what they want to do for the future. So those are some of the things when I think about like motives for savings. And I do, when I focus on these aspects, this comes out of research as well too, that focuses on, why people do what they do in terms of savings and what drives them to do that. So this also leads me into another piece in addition to motives. What are the benefits of savings? And some of the research that comes out of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau focus on, the benefits of savings, again, helps you to build your own safety net. And it means that you are doing this at your own pace. So people have different jobs, different responsibilities that affect how much and what rate they're able to save. So it means that you are doing this at your own risk. You're building like your safety net, and you can feel so proud and confident in the fact that it's hard, but it's a behavior that you are engaging in because you know that it will have long-term benefit on your overall financial well-being. It also gives you peace of mind knowing that I have a little bit set aside. So in case something happens to my car or there is a medical emergency, different things like that, I am able to dip into what I have saved and I don't have to borrow that. And we'll talk a lot more, of course, about building like an emergency savings. But it also, that gratification of, even if it's $50 a month, and some of you are way ahead of that, but for some folks, they're starting out small, and we don't mind small. Small is good. We want you to continue to do it. So sometimes it's just watching like those small amounts add up over time and feeling like that wonderful pleasure from seeing all of that. It also kind of reduce, excess borrowing. So make sure that you have this money saved, so you do not have to borrow as much as you need to. Sometimes you do need to borrow, but with like some savings, you may not need to borrow as much. So those are just some of the motives and benefits of savings when I think about that. So I like this question because it goes to this idea of, yes, all that you're saying is great. It's stuff that I hear all the time from a lot of people, different, financial educators and professionals, from my family, from my friends. But, it's still hard. It is not an easy task. So, why is saving so hard? Sometimes it's hard because when we think about like the fact that we work so hard, or we're doing like all these different things and we want to enjoy the fruits of our labor. We want to enjoy that and live in the moment. And for some people, it's also keeping up with like those changing needs. It might be that you move from, one area to the next, and cost of living is like higher, or things are just changing for you. So maybe family has grown, maybe more responsibilities has been added. So a lot of different things that could affect like that savings. The other piece, of course, has to do with, for some, like not having like a savings plan. So we have the broad general idea. Yes, you need to save. Okay, great. That's wonderful. But not having a plan on how you're going to try to execute that just makes it seem like such a dream, something I want to aspire to. But not having that plan can prevent you from even initiating and starting. Also, why it's so hard, we have different money personalities. And we talked a lot about that in our first session of the Let's Talk Money series, where we focus on, our different money personalities that for some of us, it might be a little bit easier, and for some, it might be challenging to engage in like different financial behaviors. And of course, one of those behaviors is saving. So just different things that affects how we save and when we decide to do that. Okay, I want to deep dive just a little bit. Please bear with me. I love research. We love research here. So I want to tell you about a recent article that came out in 2019 that focused a lot on, how people decide whether or not they want to save. So this article focused a lot on how educators like myself or other financial professionals, how we use like different coaching methods to help people or to help motivate people to save. And I talked about like some of those motives to save, so what drives us. But for a lot of people, it's not the desire. It's not like they lack the desire to save, but it's kind of like, why am I saving? What is the purpose? So I love this research article, and I'll tell you a little bit more about this. So previous research have found that money, such as money decision making, such as saving behaviors. So when they're making like different financial decisions, and one of those behaviors, like savings behaviors, is highly influenced by emotions. Can you believe it? Yes, highly influenced by emotion. So in this research study, they had over 102 subjects that they did like follow-ups with at different stage. And they found like a lot of different things. So there were several findings, but a couple things that I really want to share on here. So they, of course, found that in correlation with other research that, yes, savings behavior is highly emotional. And the study determined that, when people are engaged in like savings behavior, things that matter to them that has like sentimental value. So say, for example, they, either they didn't go to college, or they didn't have a lot of help with college, or they saw how like other college students struggle, and wanting to like help their students make it through. And so making sure that for things like helping them save for college. So just like different things that might relate to this study. But this big takeaway that I have from here, focuses on the fact that they focused on two groups of folks, people who just went through like that financial education sessions, and the ones that went through the financial education sessions piece, but focus more on the sentimental piece of savings. So those who focus more on the sentimental piece of savings were more likely to save, because they discovered that yes, savings is tied to our emotions. And so if we have things that matter to us, the things we want to work towards, it absolutely makes sense that we are tying that back. So for us in our job as educators and doing like these different type of webinars, is to tie that back to like what we know from research. We are trying to help build healthy saving habits. And so knowing that when people set goals that matter to them, they're more likely to save. So I just wanted to share that research. I really do like this article. There are several different ones that focus, of course, on saving behaviors, but this is one of my favorites. Okay, so other things relating to savings. So we've been talking about motivation, talking a little bit about research. People have different ways in how they save. And some, of course, of the common saving strategy as saving with a plan. And I mentioned that before, having the big idea, the big dreams of wanting to save, but actually putting that into practice. And part of tonight, we'll talk about like different steps to do that. And part of those steps include making a plan. So having a saving plan makes it more likely that you will save successfully. When you set up automatic payments, so making sure that you have that set up in such a way where you don't have to think about it, right? So in most banks, most financial institutions do have like those auto withdrawals options that you can set up to maybe withdraw money from checking to savings, so that you are not going in physically to do it every time, because then, sometimes we forget, and sometimes there's other things that's going on. Other things, of course, includes paying down like high cost debt, helping to increase like your efforts to pay off debt, as much as you can, as fast as you can help you with freeing up money that you can use towards other savings and invest in goals. It's just making sure that you think a little bit more about that. Saving for multiple goals at a time, that is very interesting. Now we'll talk some more about that, but most people, we are not just paying off debt. Some of us are saving, some of us are doing other things. So a lot of things that we're doing at a time and deciding like what you should be doing and how you should be organizing that. So again, with like our savings goals, for a lot of people, they are doing multiple things at a time. And a research study from Spencer and Fan in 2002, I know that's a while ago. Wow. Yeah, it's almost 20 years. In 2002, suggests that majority of Americans are paying off debt and saving simultaneously. So what does that mean? It means that we're doing multiple things at a time. So, for this, it's like we are also saving to reduce the amount that we borrow. We are saving to take advantage of compound interest, and we'll talk some more about that. And we're also saving to take advantage of free money. So lots of people are doing multiple things at the same time and saving for a lot of different goals, and making sure that they are contributing to things that matters to them and things that they want to use to build their future. All right, so now I have a question for you in the chat. I would like to know about some of the tools that you use to save. So I see some activities going on in the chats, and my colleagues are sharing links to some of the things that I'm talking about. So please feel free to click on those links. But for right now in the chat, what are some tools that you use to save? Separate bank accounts? Yes. So I see separate bank accounts, paper envelope, automatic withdrawal. Lots of automatic withdrawal here. Multiple accounts again, 401k, pay extra on mortgage. All right, thank you for sharing those. Yes, lots of different strategies that we do use to save and to making sure that we're using like the right tools that matter to us. So I want to cover just a few on here. There are a lot more, and a lot of that, what you are sharing in the chat as well too. So when we think about like savings tools, things that help us monitor what we're doing and also keeps us on track for like those goal setting piece. And of course, when we think about like different things, budgeting apps are a huge one that a lot of people do use right now, to organize their income, their expenses, and to see where the money is going and to see how much they do have available to put into savings and to put into like retirement. So they use like these different apps to monitor and save money. People, of course, do like those automatic savings that we've talked about. People also use like account alerts. So banks can help you set up alerts to prevent you from overspending. So sometimes when people have like simple categories that they're doing, and if they feel like they're going over, what they intended to spend, like setting up like those alerts just to keep you on your feet, just to make sure that you are not overspending. Others, of course, like no monthly fee accounts. Some financial institutions do. Unfortunately, for some people, you have to have like a minimum amount in your bank account each month, or then you'll be charged a fee. So making sure that you find the right financial institutions where you are not signed up for like an account that has like that monthly fee. So trying to reduce that. The other things, of course, is like high interest savings accounts. So different types of accounts that you can use. And I know right now for regular savings, since last year, like the interest, it's always been low, and it's even lower now. But just making sure that if you have the options to sign up for these higher interest accounts, that you look into that and use that to your advantage. All right, any questions in the chat? It looks like I see some discussion going on. Thank you to my colleagues for answering those questions. All right, so save with a plan. I want to touch on this again because this becomes very important. What does this mean? A lot of different financial educators and professionals are focused on this because they realize that for a lot of people, having something put together can help increase like their savings efforts. So, think about like the reason you're saving, what are your goals? And we covered this, throughout this webinar series. So if you need to go back and look at some of our, past recordings, those are available, of course. So making sure that you know what your goals are and you're thinking about like your reason for saving, what is driving you, what is motivating you. I always like to think of like retirement as I'm on a beach somewhere. I'm not sure that beach is, if it's in Florida, California, or the Caribbean, but I'm on a beach somewhere and there's my visualization. And that's how I think about that. And that's my motivation for savings, or at least for one of my savings goals. So think about that. Think about the amount that you need to save. It doesn't look the same for all of us. Not everybody wants to be retired by a beach. I know there are lots of people who want to retire up in Alaska. I can't wait to visit. Lots of people want to go retire up in Alaska, or wants a cabin somewhere in northern Wisconsin. So our dreams look different. And so the amount that we actually need for those dreams, it's not the same. So just thinking about like ways that you can figure out like what that amount is. And later on, I'll share kind of like a retirement calculator through FINRA as well that you can explore. The other piece is, how are you going to find this money? Where is it coming from? Think about like what your income actually is. If you have a single income or joint income, how are you going to manage that? So think about like where the money is coming from, because that's an important piece when you're thinking about, how you're going to do that and how you're going to set that up. The last piece, of course, is focusing on, where are you going to put that money? Having that money in what type of account? So which is the best type of account for you to have that money in based on the goal that you set? Is it a short-term, long-term goal that you have? And which type of account makes sense to have that money in? So think about like what these different things means when you're coming up with a plan, and that definitely can help you with like your decision making here. All right, moving on. I like talking about interest because I like the idea of earning money on my money. I think there's a lot of people who love that, right? This is why we do this. So when we think about like earning money on our money and think about like what interest actually means and looking at, what actually is compound interest. And we hear this a lot. I know when we're in school, we did things, activities in math that focus on like simple and compound interest. And so when we think about compound interest, is the idea that your money will grow over time and that the small amounts saved now can grow to much larger amount in the future. And with that compound interest too, a big things that they focus on is like the earlier you begin saving, the longer, it will be more beneficial for you in the long run. Sometimes for people, it's harder depending on where you're started on in life, but just making sure that you are investing in yourself in this way. So when we think about like that compound interest again, is just getting interest on your interest. So when you earn interest on both the money you save and the interest that you've earned. So just making sure that you're taking advantage of that. My other piece here that I love in terms of savings is coming up with like your own mantra. So we've heard lots of things about savings. So, what would be like your own mantra? Would it be something like starting early, or focus again on like that goal piece and making up like just your own saying on what you think about when you think about saving? So think about that, as you're just exploring how you want to save and why you want to save and why you want to increase savings. For some folks, again, weren't able to start early. And I've had this discussion with Kathy a few times. I didn't start my career right out of college. I went through like 2 rounds of grad school. I can tell you about that later. But going through like 2 rounds of grad school and start in like my first like full-time job like in my early 30s, and what that actually meant for my long-term goals and how I want to save. So for some of us, that starting early was great. If we had the opportunity to, but for some, it might be a little bit later that we start. So just knowing that when we're thinking about like building things up over time, just making sure that yes, starting early is very important. But if you didn't get that opportunity to do that, you can increase your savings just the same and try your best. And we'll talk a little bit more about like the impact of time on your money as we move along. All right, see lots of discussion going on in the chat. Thank you. All right, so I, of course, wanted to focus in or zoomed in a little bit more on like that multiple goals piece. So when we think about like planning for multiple goals, what it actually means. So maintaining like regular savings account where you have like that money that it is secured in a financial institution, but if you need to access it, you can also access it. So just different ways in how you can save this way. You can also create specific savings goals. And I know for a number of institutions, they have multiple accounts that you can engage in, and you can use those for like different goals that you have. Also, when we think about like saving for multiple goals or planning for multiple goals, making sure that if you do have the opportunity to participate in an employer's retirement plan, that you take advantage of that opportunity. And of course, we'll deep dive into that in just a little bit. Think about also like different opportunities that you can use to invest. For some of us, when we hear investment, it just sounds a little bit intimidating, but for some of us, we want to explore, you want to know more. And even if you have been doing that, I'm still looking to see like whether other options are available. So when we're thinking about planning for multiple goals, just keeping like these different pieces in mind. Now, multiple goals piece, I want to focus in on a couple different things, and I will spend some time on emergency savings funds because this is important, and this is one that we talk about a lot among ourselves and within our team. And when we teach on different like money habits and building like those healthy savings habits, like emergency fund is one that is just very very valuable, and we think it's important to always focus on this a little. But I'm going to deep dive a little bit on the emergency fund for you. So when we think about like an emergency fund, there's different ways in how people kind of visualize this. And again, like having like that set amount, and you can decide what that amount is. There are some recommendations that I will go over on like the exact amount that you should have in there. But again, when I think about like just this idea of like your emergency fund, people are at different stage in their financial lives. So making sure that you are doing it to your benefit. And even though there are recommendations, it's also important that you feel confident in what you're doing. So with like your emergency funds, just making sure that you are putting money aside and you're saving that money securely. It's not under your mattress like my grandma used to do, and then she forgot where she put the money. So making sure that it is being saved securely. There are different perspective, of course, on how much you should have in like your emergency fund. And experts, of course, recommend that you do have those in case there's an emergency, something unexpected happen, like a job loss, or you have car problems. So just making sure that you have some money in savings for that. But when I think of emergency savings, of course, again, people start at different places, and you can use different strategies to build that fund. So when you're thinking about your emergency fund, how do you get started? Why does this matter? And how do I get started with this? It matters because it helps to safeguard you against things that might happen that might throw you off financially. So if you have a little bit of money set aside to cover the cost of new tires, like I did this winter, realized that my tires were terrible. So I had to come up with money to get like 2 new tires. So if you have like different issues like that, just making sure that you have a little bit money set aside, that's going to help with addressing like that problem you have. So how do you do this? How do you plan your emergency savings? This, of course, you can start in different ways. But for some folks, when we think of like emergency savings, just set a goal and work towards that goal. So making sure that you have a goal in mind that you're working towards it for your emergency savings, and deciding on how much you're going to do monthly. How much can you afford to do monthly? And I see a question in the chat about the amount. I will talk about that in a little bit. So deciding on like that monthly amount, then setting up like those automatic withdrawals. We keep hearing the word automatic, right? It just takes the pressure off us a little bit. So setting up those automatic withdrawals, and also setting limits on accessing that fund. It shouldn't be so easily accessible, making sure that it is tucked away and you do not dip into it very often if you can avoid doing that. So this can definitely help with like creating like that plan. With like your emergency savings, starting small. Again, we're starting at different places, so it is okay to start small. But we also want you, again, to save it securely so that you know that it is in a place that you are maybe earning a little bit of interest on. So you're earning a little bit of interest on that, but you are not necessarily dipping into it. So saving it securely. And sometimes things happen, and you might have to use it to cover tires, right? Or something else. The fact is, you should keep it going, just making sure that you keep that amount going. Experts have different recommendation, as I said before, just to like answering that question that was in the chat. Some say that you should have between 3 to 9 months worth of living expenses saved. When I teach on this topic, I always share that recommendation, but I also tell people that there are other experts that says you should have at least $500 in emergency savings. So just having some money put away is better than not having any at all. So just making sure that if you can get on that track to say, okay, I'm going to have 3 to 9 months and we'll work towards this because I have a steady regular income, and this just makes sense for my family, and I want to safeguard that way. Or if you're just starting out and you just know that you want a few $100s to make sure that you have something in like a savings account that you're not using, you can start small, save securely, just keep it going. I want to share another example, an example of, looking at just different ways in how an emergency savings can be like beneficial for us. And again, like I said, I was going to spend a little bit of time on this because this becomes very important, and people hear this term all the time, and sometimes it's confusing and sometimes we just get it right away. But I wanted to highlight this table that comes from the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. And this came out a few years ago. And so in this example, it just looks closer at the benefits of having an emergency savings. So, this table compares like 3 different sources. And when you look at this, it just kind of breaks it down for you. So in this example, there is a consumer who has an auto repair of $350. So something's wrong with their vehicle and they're trying to figure out, how am I going to cover this $350? So in this example, it shows you like in that column that says emergency savings, kind of like if you have this much in emergency savings, how much will you pay for like the annual percentage rate? And the annual percentage rate, of course, is the rate charged for borrowing that money. What's the repayment term is going to look like, how much you're going to pay in interest, and what your total cost is going to be. It also juxtaposes the fact that if you pay for it with a credit card, so say, for example, you do not have that emergency savings and you're going to charge it to your credit card, it shows how much you will pay in APR. It shows how long it will take you to pay it off and what you will actually pay in interest, and so what the total is going to be. Then the other part looks at using like a payday loan to cover this cost. So using like a payday loan to cover this cost, what that actually means, with payday loan, like the total that you pay in interest right now is even higher than what is on here, the 391%. So just knowing that if you have like an emergency savings, you do not have to pay any interest. You don't have to come up with a repayment term that you have to get this paid off. Just knowing that you have that much in savings, you can cover that cost instead of borrowing to do that. Now, sometimes, you have all the best effort to have like that emergency savings, but sometimes you might need to use like a credit card to cover that, but just making sure that you pay that off. But again, having like that emergency savings can help with covering the cost of that. And I want to quickly run through this as I'm looking at the time. The Federal Reserve produced a report each year on the economic well-being of U.S. household. And I love this one. And I believe Stacia talked about it last week as well, too. But I wanted to share this one from 2019. They use also supplemental data from mid to 2020 last year. So there's some 2020 information, 2019 information in here. But this just kind of highlight the benefits of like having like an emergency savings. And they did, of course, with like this information, this research, just finding that, 63% of adults in 2019 said that they would be able to cover like $400, in kind of like emergency things using like cash or cash equivalent. So for, building like an emergency savings fund, the benefits of this is just tremendous and wonderful for a lot of people. And it helps to reduce not just the financial stress, but the anxiety that might come from, having to deal with like this financial emergency that's going on. So just wanting to focus a little bit more on that piece for you. All right, so I'm going to head in to talk a little bit more about investing. I'm not going to dwell too much on this piece because we have other resources that we want to share with you. But for building like your savings or savings for multiple goals, having an emergency fund is a great tool. But there are, of course, other tools, if you're looking to save for the long term, that is going to be very beneficial for you. So when we think about like investing, it's just another great approach to exploring like or different options that we have. So of course with investing is like committing like that money or capital to an endeavor. And so with the expectation that you will earn money on like the money that you put into this. So when we think about like investing, this is also of course another tool that can help us get to those goals that we're working on. So I have a quick question for you if you don't mind sharing the chat. When do you think people should start to invest? I just want to hear or see your thoughts on this one. Please feel free to share in the chat with us. ASAP. Yes, I see as soon as you can. More answers in here. Lots of it as soon as possible. When you have a strong foundation, 20s, after college paid for, college that can take a while. Pay off debt first. Okay, lots of different responses. Thank you. Keep going in the chat. Again, we use like this information for benefit as well too, just to find out a little bit more from your perspective. So when we think about when we should start savings, there are a number of questions that I try to address when I'm working with folks and trying to figure this piece out. I ask questions like, why do you want to invest? So thinking about like why people want to invest, or goals are important to us, and we can use them as a guide to stay on track. So, figuring out like what financial goals we have, having like that sense of security and building up reserves again is another motivator for a lot of people wanting to invest. But also, depending on like your employment situation, to see if there is, possibility for you to participate in your employer plan, and using that to make like different choices that are going to be beneficial for you as you think about like what you want your retirement to be. I also ask, questions like, am I ready to invest? So just think about like what your financial situation is right now. So a lot of what we've done in this series, of course, is helping folks develop like these healthy habits. And part of it is thinking about, how do I track my expenses? Do I have a spending plan in place? How do I have my finances organized? Just going to help me think more about what I have coming in and what I have going out, just to know, what it's going to look like for me as I explore doing more investments. Also, thinking about if you're able to save regularly. Is there some financial disruption in your life right now that's preventing you from saving regularly? Or if you're at a place where that's very possible right now, just making sure that you are examining that. Then also to effective credit management. That is great. Keeping like your credit utilization low, just making sure that when you're using credit, you are using it wisely, so that you are paying that off and you're paying it on time. Other things, of course, too, thinking about like readiness, like insurance is a big thing. So when we think about like what are some of the protective measures that we use to make sure that we're not paying for things just out of pocket or trying to come up with that money, right? So that's what it feels like most of the time, trying to come up with that money. So in case there's an accident or a health crisis. Another question is, where can I get this money? So again, if you have employment and you're working, so the concept of paying yourself first is a personal finance strategy that we use to, help people increase like their savings over time and to save regularly. So making sure that you are balancing that out for yourself and you are paying yourself. So you are saving money, you're putting money aside for yourself. With like investing, we definitely try to cover some of the basics piece, but there's going to be a link that's shared in the chat. Seisha and her colleague Andrea just did a fantastic job on investing basics for a Get Savvy webinar series. And of course, with this series, they cover a lot of things on like stocks and bonds and just helping you through the process of, understanding some of the basic steps that you need to take when you're thinking about like investing and understanding some of the concepts that we hear constantly. So make sure that you check that out. The link is in the chat. So if you want to learn a little bit more on like investing basics, please check out that recording. When we're thinking about like saving for multiple goals, so we've talked about exploring like investing options. We've talked about emergency savings. So now looking to see focusing a little bit more on retirement. And I've been mentioning that throughout. So when we think a little bit more about like retirement, just understanding that no two retirements are the same. Just like I described myself on a beach, again, it looks different to different people. So just making sure that you try to figure out as early as you can what that's going to kind of look like for you. And looking at the different plans that are offered and how it fits like your situation. These are very important pieces to think about, like how you're going to create that plan and determine like what you actually need for your retirement. Again, we keep going back to automatic. So setting up like those automatic contributions through your employer and making sure that you have that. I also want to say that even when we feel like we've had like such a good idea of what we want to do, things change. So it is okay to reevaluate your plan. Just making sure that if you have other people involved, like you sit down and talk together to see what you would like to change about that. We also recommend that you talk with a financial professional that focuses on retirement plan and helping you through that process so that they can understand your individual case. Again, no two are the same, your personalized case, so they can walk through that or help you through that. I just wanted to share some data on like your contributions that you can make. So these haven't changed since last year. So Stacia did a wonderful job last year. I believe her and Andrea did this with creating like this chart just to show a little bit more about like what your contributions can be to like a retirement fund from last year. And then again, these numbers haven't changed. So whether you are contributing through a 401k or 403b or 457, so all of these different ones, just making sure that you are having like a good idea. And this information again comes from the IRS. So just knowing that this information is on there that shows like your contribution limits. There are links in the chat just to let you know that with like for these limits, you can explore a little bit more to see what fits well for you. And I also have on here too with like for the IRAs, just like the individual retirement accounts, like what those contribution limits are for 2020 into 2021. All right, so I've been talking about multiple goals. So what I want to like quickly highlight is the fact that we just did a wonderful podcast, and we talk about our podcast a lot. For this, that Stacia did a great job. I keep saying Stacia, you've been doing so many amazing things. Thank you. Stacia did a wonderful job with her and I and Kathy. We talked about, thinking in the long term. So just focusing on which goal should you do first? Should I do one first? Should I do them simultaneously? So we had a wonderful discussion about saving for your retirement, saving for your kids' education. And we also looked a little bit into like those 529 plans. So lots of great information from different sources from us. So you can definitely find that link in the chat to our Family Financial Feud podcast, Thinking Long Term. All right, I know we only have a few minutes, and I'm going to quickly turn over to Kathy as she's going to talk some more about, kind of the time value on our money. Kathy, I'll hand over to you.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Kamaya. So we're going to what I want to say is to remember that when you start thinking about that transition from saving money so that you have it when you need it in the short term, to thinking about investing for the long term, it's really about the time. And as Kamaya said, there's a webinar on investing that this is really not going to supplement it. I mean, this is not going to replace that. This is only just a little teaser about it. But it's very important when you're thinking about time and saving, especially for things that are long-term goals, things that are going to happen down the road, whether that's buying a house or retiring, that we think about how much time we have, and we choose our saving or investment tool accordingly. So one of the things about time is that when we start saving and investing young, time is on our side. And so that is because of compounded returns. Compounding returns means that you're earning interest not only on or returns, not only on the money you have put in, but on the returns that are accumulating in that account. So let's say, for example, if we look at this chart, somebody that at age 22 was able to put away $2,000 a year for 9 years. So they only put in $18,000 of their earned income, okay? But they let that money sit there for over 35 years. And as it made returns, and we're assuming the money earns 9% return, these returns were made, they stayed in the account and it grew and it compounded on top of it. And the money that would be available to this person at age 65 would be $579,000. Now, in contrast, if somebody waited and didn't get a chance to start until they were 31 and then put away $2,000 a year and a total of $70,000 of their wages, then they'd have a lot of money at age 65, almost $500,000, but still not quite as much as they would have had if they had gotten started earlier. Excuse me, just a second. Wouldn't you know, now I have to cough. So I know some of you are probably thinking 9%, that sounds amazing. But when we look at the stock market during any 30-year time period, historically, we can see a 9% or better return. I don't have a crystal ball, so I can't tell you about the next 30 years, but that's where that number is coming from. Now, if we go to the next slide, though, it's important to keep in mind this whole concept of time frame matching. Next slide, please, Kamaya. So again, this is for long term, because in the long term, what we have to worry about is inflation. We want our money to be somewhere in whatever account or investment that it's in, where in the long term, our return will be higher than inflation. Otherwise, if we're saving for retirement, we'll actually end up with less money than we started with. So for example, if I was to put all my money for retirement into a savings account that maybe got 1% and inflation until I retired was 3% a year or something, I'd actually be losing money, even though that savings account is very safe and not volatile. I wouldn't have the purchasing power I needed when I retired. On the flip side, though, if you're saving for something like a car and you want it in a few years, or your kids are teenagers and you're saving for college education and they want to go when they graduate at 18, then you need to have your money in a tool, an account where the values are not fluctuating. So the money will be there when you need it. So matching your goals with your investment or savings accounts matters. The other thing that really matters when you're investing, and I'm just putting that out here, is diversification. And so we want to make sure that all our eggs are not all in one nest, as they say. We want to make sure that we spread out our investments so that if one company doesn't do well, or one part of the market, one sector, maybe technology or ag or healthcare or whatever, doesn't do well, all of our investments don't do poorly that year. But like I said, there's lots more we could talk about investing, but not tonight. Tonight, we're really focusing on starting that savings and getting that habit moving forward. And we're really, not going to get into all the different investment opportunities. So as Kamaya has said before, we do want to remember that when you get into investing, it's after you have that strong foundation and that base so that you have something to stabilize you. And then also the idea that if you are looking for a financial professional, we do have a website and information called Choosing a Financial Professional that can help you think about what questions you want to ask. We also have a webinar, Get Savvy. Sorry, I always think of the website. We have both. So that you can get a good match for you, a financial professional that can help you in your place and at your stage of life, and that will be able to communicate well with you. All right, back to you, Kamaya.
Thank you so much, Kathy. I love when you do this. You always do a great job with like
Thanks.
wrapping this up real nicely. I know I don't have a lot of time with you, but if you could bear with me for 2 more minutes, I have a couple more things for you here. In the beginning, we did kind of like an initial survey, ask you, how likely you are to save now. And we're going to launch this other survey. How likely are you to save after the webinar? So we want to see kind of like what your responses are. And I can share that again, it's anonymous, so your name won't pop up or any identifier for you. All right, your seat's going.
We so appreciate when everybody participates in these polls. It's just so, I think it's so cool.
So great. I think it's so great. All right, so I'm going to end the poll and share the results. Have you noticed any difference, Kathy?
Well, yeah, look at it. Either the people that don't want to save left, or there's been some really positive changes. So I think that's pretty cool.
So thank you so much for participating in that. I just have a couple more things on here. Just to kind of quickly debrief, I went through a lot of things really fast. So I want to just quickly go over some of the different things that we talked about. And if you have any questions, we're here. We'll stay on afterwards. So just like focusing on like the motives. Again, we love behavioral economics. Focus on the motives and benefits of savings and what are some of the challenges that people might encounter with that. Also looking at like the common saving strategies that people use. Planning for multiple goals. We like to talk about this because it feels like it's a hot topic sometimes when people are trying to figure out like what decisions they should make. And then of course we zoomed in a little bit on talking about emergency savings, some information on retirement, and then investment, and then looking a little bit at like the effect of time on your money. My last poll for you on here, or I have two more. So this one and another one, and then if you have to hop off because you have wonderful things to do on the season night, I completely understand. But I wanted to share a couple of things on here. So for our next poll, this of course again is anonymous. If you want to pull that out for me, Kathy, thank you.
You're thinking of the one about gender and race, correct?
Yes. So okay. This is not another one of our demographic, and you might need to scroll to answer all three questions. So again, for us, we use this information because it's important for us. It's anonymous. It helps us with like our funding and all our different efforts that we make to offer quality and free programming. So thank you for participating in this. Great. I see lots of response coming in. So thank you so much again for doing that. We also have a survey that just to get feedback on our webinar series. This is our last for the season. We're going to miss, I know we have a lot of regulars and we have new people coming on each week. It's been such a pleasure to do this and for you to spend a part of your Tuesday evening with us. We are so grateful for that. So thank you so much for doing that.